Shawty wanna with the GTI. Yeah. Please don't hit the curb and scratch the tire.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Storm. If you don't know who I am the lead admin for the Too Fast Racing Discord and forums. I am the only individual that's won a list racing event, and my goal for these videos is to teach you how to tune the car and how to get it to a competitive number, and this give beginners and even some experienced people a little bit more understanding on how to get the cars where you want it. If you've been following the series, we've done engine and transmission tuning on our project Moonhawk. So last time we were in, we did some engine work. We raised the RPM and it pulled us up to 1,000 horsepower. We did put some drag slicks on it, and we did pull the car all the way down to a 9.6. Last time on the videos, what we ran into is we did have a little bit of a wheelie problem. And that's what we're trying to avoid. The easiest ways to fix a wheelie is going to come down to proper suspension. So let's get into that. The biggest thing with suspension on these cars is you want to get the right suspension parts. So we're going to start on the front suspension. Sometimes this is under the front subframe depending on what car it's on. The biggest thing is, let's go ahead and for about everything you want to do is you want to put race components on it. What this is going to do is allow you to tune those components and get them where you want them. We're going to put race front sway bars on it. That's going to keep the car from doing the twist that you're seeing. It's doing a torque twist to the right. Spindles, you don't have to worry about it. That's what connects you to the wheels. We did tackle wheels. What I didn't do is get us to a front drag wheel, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. The purpose of getting us to a front drag wheel is a little bit less drag on the front end, and allows the car to steer a little bit better on a narrow tire, and we're going to want the skinny tire. So that's the suspension for the front. Under the rear, same deal. We're going to want race components. Okay, that puts us on race suspension. Let's just see what it does with all default race components. So that right there immediately cleaned up some of our wheelie. But what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to tune the car and get that suspension right. So suspension tuning can be difficult, especially on the higher power applications that you will get into. But for now, because we're not on a crazy power number and we're only shooting for the 8s, suspension tuning is going to be key. Let's go to our tuning. So there's a whole lot of sliders here. Again, we're worried about suspension. This is our suspension, but it's here. So with the car twisting as much as it is, the anti-roll spring rate, this is what keeps the car from twisting side to side. We're going to want that spring rate all the way up on both. That's going to help keep that car from twisting side to side. In regards to most cars, you're going to want the bump dampening and the spring rate all the way up, and you want to bring that rebound dampening down. That rebound is how fast that front end will bounce. The other thing we're going to want to do, because we're trying to prevent a wheelie, is we're going to want to lower that front suspension. What that does is that's going to allow us to keep that front end a little bit closer to the ground. In regards to the rear, for now we're going to leave most of this alone. All this will come into plan a little bit later, but let's go ahead and try it with just lowering that front suspension and seeing what this car does. As you can see, we eliminated a little bit of our twist here, and we also cleaned up some of our 60 foot. That alone immediately picked us up some time. We went from a 9.3 to a 9.1. So that in itself drastically makes a difference. What we're going to do is we're going to come back to this, and we're going to lower this front end just a little bit more, and let's go ahead and just bring it all the way down. And that's going to help prevent us doing a wheelie. The anti-rolls kept the car from twisting a little bit. For the rear suspension, all this becomes finite tuning. Most of the time you can leave it alone with factory race components, and that will help. The other thing we can do potentially is lower the rear suspension just a little bit, and that should help just a little bit too. So let's go ahead and get there. Potentially we won't see an 8-second pass, but it does clean up our 60 foot and get us to a more competitive time. Yeah, we are at the 9.1s. So that right there is the key to suspension tuning. Is you're gonna have to adjust the suspension to match what the car needs. The anti-roll, the bump dampening, and the spring rate, that just stiffens that front end up. For the rear, what we can do is we can either stiffen it up to try to help prevent the wheelie, or we can soften it. What we can do is we can go and we can soften the spring rate a little bit. That's going to allow it to absorb more into the rear. Damper rate and extension, we can bring that down. We can kind of soften this rear end up a little bit, and that should help the rear end kind of plant a little bit better, but potentially can further our wheelie issue. Yeah, so we did lose a little bit of time doing that. Our 60 foot did kind of take a hit there, so shortening that up didn't help too much. When you get to this point, you do have a couple other options. You can start looking at different transmissions, for example, or you can go and maybe add a little bit more power. I would avoid that with adding wheelies. But this point in time, we're close, but that gives you a key fundamental and understanding how the suspension works. With the bump dampening, what's going to happen is that suspension is going to want to carry, and then once it carries, it sets back down. The suspension doesn't want to bounce. It might bob a little bit, but that bump dampening absorbs most of that. So when the car sets down, it doesn't violently throw you back up immediately. That's the key to the bump dampening. You want this to be able to extend as much as it can and then set back down. So what we can do here, because we're messing with the front bump rebound dampening, we can pull that down a little bit more. If you use control on your keyboard, you can kind of observe what it's doing. So that kept the tires planted even at a little bit higher height, and it allowed it to set back down a little bit more comfortably. For the rear end, kind of the same deal. You can allow it to extend up. Obviously, we don't need it to extend up too much, but we can get it to kind of sit a little smoother and go with that. So we're back to the 9.2s. So getting the suspension right can help times. It can also hurt times. The suspension is one of those you have to play with it and adjust it to what the car needs, but that gives you an intro to suspension tuning, and I will see you guys on the next video.